The campaign has been running for 8 weeks. The head of digital sits across the table from the marketing director with a printed analytics report. Click-through rate 3.1%.
Bounce rate on the program landing page, 61%. Inquiry form submissions, 247. Applications initiated from those inquiries, 29. Application completions, 11. The marketing director looks at the numbers. She asks the question the report can't answer. Why? Why is the bounce rate 61% and not 35? Why are 247 people filling in the inquiry form but only 29 initiating an application? Why are 29 applications being started but only 11 being completed? Is it the copy? Is it the form? Is it the process? Is it the audience targeting? Is it the time of year? The head of digital doesn't know. He knows what happened. He doesn't know why it happened. And without knowing why, he can't change it in any direction other than guesswork.
They agree to run an A/B test.
The head of digital suggests changing the color of the call to action button. The marketing director agrees because she doesn't know what else to suggest. 3 weeks later, the button color test produces a 0.4% improvement in click-through on the CTA. The bounce rate is unchanged. The application completion rate is unchanged. The problem, whatever it is unchanged. The problem was never the button. It was the copy on the page above the button, which failed to address the dominant fear of the audience arriving from the paid search campaign. But because there was no hypothesis, there was no test designed to detect it. And because there was no test designed to detect it, it went unfound for an entire recruitment cycle. Conversion testing without a hypothesis is noise. A hypothesis without conversion testing is opinion. This chapter gives you the methodology that connects them. Before we continue, quick note. This is chapter 6 of my book, The Science of Persuasive Copy. It builds directly on the frameworks from the first 5 episodes of this series. Links to the full book, including the complete testing templates and implementation exercises, are in the description. Let's get into it. The psychological barrier to effective conversion testing isn't technical. It's cognitive. Human beings are pattern-seeking animals with a strong and well-documented tendency toward confirmation bias, the tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information in ways that confirm what we already believe. In a marketing context, this means that copy is almost always evaluated by the people who wrote it, briefed it, or approved it. People who already believe it's good, or at minimum better than the alternatives they considered and rejected. Confirmation bias in copy evaluation produces 2 consistent failure modes. The first is false positive assessment. Copy that performs adequately gets assumed to be performing well, because no one has constructed a rigorous comparison. The second, and the more damaging of the two, is hypothesis-free testing. Changes get made to copy assets based on intuition, aesthetic preference, or stakeholder feedback, rather than on a behaviorally grounded prediction about what's actually causing underperformance and why a specific change would address it. The antidote to both failure modes is identical: a structured hypothesis, formed before any test is designed, that states specifically what is being tested, why the current version is believed to underperform, what the proposed change is intended to do differently, and what metric will constitute actual evidence that the hypothesis was correct. Here's a principle worth writing down. Every A/B test that is not preceded by a written hypothesis is an experiment without a question. It may produce interesting data. It will not produce reliable knowledge. This brings us to the framework for this chapter. The HE CRO Testing Protocol, a structured methodology for identifying, prioritizing, testing, and implementing copy improvements across higher education digital assets. It operates in 4 phases: audit, hypothesize, test, and implement. Each phase produces a specific output that feeds directly into the next. Phase 1 is the behavioral friction audit. Before any hypothesis can be formed, the current state of a copy asset has to be understood in behavioral terms, not aesthetic ones. The audit examines every element of an asset for the presence of friction. Anything that increases the cognitive load, the doubt, the confusion, or the resistance of the reader at any point in their journey through the page. Behavioral friction in higher education copy takes 6 consistently identifiable forms. The first is clarity friction, where the reader can't understand quickly enough what the page is offering, who it's for, or what they should do next. The usual causes are dense opening paragraphs, missing or ambiguous headlines, unclear calls to action, and unexplained institutional terminology that the audience doesn't actually use. The second is relevance friction, where the reader can't see quickly enough that the page is specifically relevant to their situation. This is caused by generic audience language, the absence of audience-specific signals, and copy that tries to address multiple audience segments simultaneously without differentiating between them. The third is trust friction, where the reader encounters a claim, a credential, or an institutional assertion they can't immediately verify, or that feels inconsistent with their prior experience of the institution. Unattributed statistics, generic prestige language, outdated social proof, and missing accreditation details all create trust friction at the exact moment you most need the reader's belief. The fourth is process friction, where the reader encounters complexity, ambiguity, or apparent difficulty in the application or inquiry process that generates anxiety rather than confidence. Long document requirement lists, unclear deadlines, multi-step processes described without clear sequencing, and missing information about what happens after submission are the most common sources. The fifth is emotional friction, where the copy shifts emotional register unexpectedly, from warm and human at the awareness stage to cold and administrative at the conversion point, creating a tonal discontinuity that the reader experiences as a sudden loss of trust right when they're closest to committing. And the sixth is evidence friction, where the reader is presented with a claim that requires belief but is not immediately substantiated by evidence, creating the kind of gap that high-loss aversion audiences, which is nearly every prospective higher education applicant, instinctively fill with doubt rather than with trust. The behavioral friction audit maps every copy element against these 6 friction types before any test is designed. This matters enormously, because friction identification is what makes the difference between a hypothesis that's grounded in behavioral reality and a hypothesis that's really just an aesthetic preference dressed up in testing language. Phase 2 is hypothesize. A valid hypothesis-led copy test has 5 components, each of which has to be specified before the test begins, not after the data comes in. The first is observation. What is the specific underperformance signal that actually prompted this test? Not conversion is low, but something like, the inquiry form completion rate drops by 43% between page load and form submission, suggesting the copy immediately preceding the form is generating doubt rather than momentum. The second is hypothesis. What specific behavioral mechanism is believed to be causing the observed underperformance? Not, the copy is weak, but something like, the form is preceded by a list of required documents, which introduces process anxiety at the exact moment the reader is closest to converting, and is driving abandonment. The third is prediction. What specific change is proposed, and what specific outcome is predicted? Something like, replacing the document list with a single reassurance sentence, most applications take under 12 minutes to complete, is predicted to reduce form abandonment by a minimum of 15%. The fourth is test design. How will the test be structured? What sample size is required for statistical validity? And how long will the test run? And the fifth is success criterion. What specific metric result will be taken as confirmation of the hypothesis, and what result will falsify it?
Without all 5 of these in place before the test begins, the test produces data but not insight.
Data without insight produces the button color problem we opened with. changes that generate marginal movement on surface metrics while leaving the underlying behavioral barrier entirely undisturbed. Phase 3 is test. There are 3 testing methods, and understanding which one is appropriate for which situation is one of the most practical skills a higher education marketer can develop. The first is A/B testing, the simultaneous comparison of 2 versions of a copy asset, where all variables except the one being tested are held constant. This is the highest confidence method for isolating the causal effect of a specific copy change, but it requires sufficient traffic volume and sufficient time to reach statistical validity. As a rough guide, a minimum of 1,000 unique visitors per variant and a minimum of 2 weeks of test duration is necessary before any result should be treated as reliable. A/B tests that are called early, before statistical significance is reached, are a consistent source of false conclusions in e-marketing. The temptation to stop a test when it appears to be going well is one of the most common sources of conversion decisions that can't actually be replicated. The second method is multivariate testing, the simultaneous comparison of multiple copy variables across multiple versions of an asset. This is more powerful than A/B testing in theory, because it can reveal interaction effects between variables, but it requires substantially more traffic and substantially longer test durations to produce reliable results. For most higher education institutions, multivariate testing is only viable on the highest traffic pages in the recruitment funnel, typically the program search or the program overview landing page. The third method is sequential testing, where one copy version is run for a defined period, then replaced by a second version for an equivalent period. This is the most practical testing method for lower traffic pages or for institutions that can't simultaneously split traffic between 2 versions. It's less statistically robust than A/B or multivariate testing because it can't control for seasonal variation or changes in audience composition across the 2 periods. But a well-structured sequential test, with clearly defined periods, consistent traffic sources, and careful documentation of external variables, produces directionally useful insights even when it can't produce definitive causal proof. Across all 3 methods, there are 5 copy elements that the research consistently identifies as highest impact in higher education conversion testing, meaning changes to these elements produce the largest and most reliable effects on conversion rates. The headline or opening statement is consistently the single highest impact variable, because it's the first thing the reader evaluates and the primary determinant of whether they engage with anything else on the page at all. The call to action text and positioning is second, not because CTA color doesn't matter, it genuinely does, but because the words on the button and the copy immediately surrounding it have a larger effect on conversion than the aesthetic treatment of the button itself. The social proof format and specificity comes third, because general testimonials and named, specific alumni case studies produce measurably different conversion rates with high loss aversion audiences. The evidence sequencing, specifically whether the dominant fear is addressed before outcome evidence is presented or after, is fourth. And the process clarity copy immediately preceding the inquiry form or application CTA is fifth, because this is the point in the funnel where process anxiety most reliably causes abandonment. Phase 4 is implement. The most common failure in conversion testing isn't the testing itself. It's what happens, or more accurately what doesn't happen, when a test produces a clear result. A winning variant that isn't implemented across the full campaign and across related assets represents a conversion improvement that exists in the data but not in the world. Implementation requires 4 things: documenting the winning variant and the hypothesis it confirmed, updating the live asset, propagating the learning to related assets in the same campaign or funnel, and adding the insight to a permanent institutional testing record that future campaign teams can actually use. That last point, the testing record, is something almost no higher education marketing team maintains systematically, which means the same conversion problems get discovered, tested, and forgotten repeatedly across recruitment cycles. A structured testing record is one of the highest leverage process investments a marketing department can make, because it turns individual test results into accumulated institutional knowledge rather than isolated data points. Let me bring this together with a direct example of what hypothesis-led testing looks like when it's applied correctly to a real problem. The scenario is a UK university with a postgraduate landing page for an MSc in international business. The bounce rate is 58%. The existing copy opens with a paragraph about the university's global ranking and its research profile. The inquiry form appears about 2/3 of the way down the page. Observation: 58% of visitors are leaving the page without submitting the inquiry form, and scroll depth data shows that the majority of abandonment happens in the first third of the page, before the outcome evidence section is even reached. Hypothesis: the opening paragraph leads with institutional prestige signals, Tier 2 content in the message pyramid, before addressing any Tier 1 emotional concern. International postgraduate applicants arriving from paid search, who are typically mid-consideration stage, are not finding immediate relevance confirmation in the opening, and are abandoning before the persuasive content begins. Prediction: replacing the opening paragraph with a Tier 1 recognition statement drawn from Voice of Customer Research, specifically addressing the career mobility concern identified as the dominant fear of this audience segment, will reduce first-third abandonment and increase inquiry form submissions by a minimum of 20%. Test design: A/B test, landing page only, paid search traffic only, minimum 2 weeks, minimum 1,000 visitors per variant. Variant A is the existing opening paragraph. Variant B opens with: if you're considering an MSc in international business because you want the career options that a domestic degree isn't giving you, the question worth answering first is whether the specific employers you're targeting actually recognize this qualification. Here's what our graduates found when they asked it. Success criterion: a statistically significant increase in inquiry form submissions and a measurable reduction in first-third bounce rate in Variant B versus Variant A. Notice the structure of this hypothesis. It names a specific behavioral mechanism, not just, the copy isn't working. It proposes a change grounded in the frameworks from earlier in this series. And it predicts a specific outcome on a specific metric, which means the test produces a genuine answer rather than a data point that can be interpreted any way the reader wants. If you're finding this series useful, subscribe now, because the next chapter moves from individual copy asset testing into the full architecture of a multi-channel enrollment campaign, building everything we've covered across these 6 episodes into a coherent, end-to-end persuasion system. Let's close this chapter out. The marketing director at the start of this episode wasn't making a mistake by agreeing to test the button color. She was making the only move available to her, because no one in the room had a behaviorally grounded hypothesis about what was actually wrong. Conversion testing is only as powerful as the hypothesis it's built on. The hypothesis is only as good as the behavioral friction audit that preceded it. And the audit is only possible if you understand the behavioral science, the audience psychology, and the message architecture from the earlier chapters in this series well enough to recognize friction when you see it. That's the chain this whole series is building. And every link in it matters. If you'd like the complete version of this chapter, including the full behavioral friction audit checklist, the complete HE CRO Testing Protocol templates, and the implementation exercises, the book this series is based on, The Science of Persuasive Copy, is linked in the description below. It's available on Barnes & Noble, on Everand, and through Thalia. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Description box. Most university marketing teams run A/B tests without a hypothesis. They change button colors, adjust layouts, and move sections around, and the underlying conversion problem stays exactly where it was. This episode covers the HE CRO Testing Protocol, a 4-phase methodology for identifying behavioral friction in your copy, forming a grounded hypothesis, running the right test, and actually implementing what you learn. This is Chapter 6 of The Science of Persuasive Copy, Building on Risk Reduction, EP.1, Dual Process Psychology. EP.2, Voice of Customer Research, EP.3, Message Hierarchy, EP.4, and Copy Frameworks, EP.5. Book. Get the full book, The Science of Persuasive Copy, by Mujahid Baber. Barnes & Noble. https://www.barnesandnoble.com/w/The Science of Persuasive Copy. Mujahid Baber. 1,149,669,071? Ian equals 2,940,183,185,713. Everand. https://www.everand.com/book/101084085/. The Science of Persuasive Copy. The Writing Craft. Thalia. https://www.thalia.de/shop/home/article details/A10785543334. The full chapter includes the complete behavioral friction audit checklist, testing protocol templates, and step-by-step implementation exercises not covered in this video. Bell subscribe for a new episode every week. Hashtag higher education marketing, hashtag conversion optimization, hashtag CRO, hashtag copywriting, hashtag persuasive copywriting, hashtag A/B testing.